everyone, and welcome to Raw TV. I'm Kaylee Green.
And I'm Nadia Schultz.
And Nadia, it's your first time as a host. How are you feeling right now?
Oh my gosh, so excited.
Yeah.
It's a great transition to being on panel, to being the host now. It's really exciting.
Well, we are so excited to have you. So today our show is called Out of the Shadows.
Yeah, and Out of the Shadows is talking about a really touchy subject that a lot of us deal with, that is not only really prevalent in our lives as college students, but with just the general population. And it's mental illness. So mental illness is a large epidemic that a lot of people work with, and a lot of times the church puts it out of their minds, they push it under the rug, and we don't want to deal with it, and that's really unfortunate. And so tonight we're talking about that and what we can do as the church to remedy it.
Exactly, and mental illness is something that a lot of people have, but a lot of people don't want to bring to light because there is shame often attached to that. So right now we just want to be able to talk to the panel, talk to our guest, which is going to be on panel, Professor Peyton. We are so excited to have him and to just kind of talk about what it means to just be there for the people who have mental illnesses.
Exactly, and to come alongside them and to show them love and compassion in those times that they're struggling.
That's right. But first, a word on the street with Candace Herring.
It turns out that 1 in 5 Americans currently suffer from some form of mental illness. These include depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, and many others. The problem that we as a society have is that we are currently unaware of the severity that is a mental illness. That's why we're on the street asking people this question. Have you seen any negativity towards mental illnesses? And how do you and should you react when you find out that somebody has a mental illness? Let's see what they had to say.
Well, I've seen a little bit of negativity. I wouldn't say there's this overarching just cloud of negativity, but definitely a little bit of negativity. As far as reaction goes, I mean, just like God calls us to react to anything else, patiently, make sure you get all the facts about whatever you're talking about, whether it is mental illness or any other issue. Obviously treat them with love, treat them the same way you treat someone else.
I have seen negativity toward mental illnesses because sometimes I think in the church they kind of disregard mental illnesses and they think that you can just pray it away. And trust me, I believe in prayer, but definitely sometimes I do think people need medical help and they need attention.
I have definitely seen negativity towards mental illnesses, especially in cultures that are not American. I'd say Asian cultures or Caribbean cultures. I think they don't really address it at all and kind of put it to the back burner, thinking that it really doesn't exist.
I think that whenever you kind of discover that somebody has a mental disability, that the first thing to do is to not treat them a different way than you normally would.
As we can see, people tend to be more accepting of those who have mental illnesses. Many people can understand mental illnesses from a first-hand experience. Whether it is personal or somebody you know, mental illnesses can affect everybody, and they are a common occurrence. That's why we should never be quick to judge and always treat others with love and understanding. I'm Candace Herring with Word on the Street. Back to you guys in the studio.
Thank you so much, Candace, for that awesome word on the street. So we are talking today about mental illness. So what is a mental illness?
It can be classified under many things, and I feel like it depends on the person. So I have a list. So it can be under clinical depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, dementia, schizophrenia, PTSD, OCD, anything that's going on with you mentally.
I think it's interesting that you do have a list, and thankfully you do have a list because I had no idea all of those things were.
And that's only a small portion of it.
Yeah, well, see? Well, that goes to show, if nothing is really talked about, we don't really know, unless we personally experience it or we experience it secondhand. Or, I didn't know depression was a part of that list.
Right.
And me not knowing exactly how to not interact, but how to take care or how to encourage or be there for someone, the way that they need it to be. I didn't know anything about depression, so my freshman year and sophomore year, I had a roommate that struggled with depression, and it was hard and draining for me because I had no idea of how to meet her. Well, I knew how to meet her where she was, but how to walk alongside her because it wasn't a great communication avenue. So it was really hard for me. So what would be any advice if you guys have experienced that or secondhand experienced it.
Personally, for me, I have had a handful of people in my life who are very close to me who walked through depression, just like you were saying with your roommate. And honestly, my thing was I tried to be as funny as I could, because if I could make them laugh, that was like checked off, like I can go to bed tonight, I'm good. But really it's just being there for them and encouraging them.
Yes.
And telling them that you think they're great, telling them you think that they're really smart, they're amazing, just giving them that affirmation that they need.
And also touching into like love languages,
Yeah.
because someone might not be a words of affirmation person, but they might be into gifts, or they might be into like physical touch. So like whenever I have my wonderful anxiety attacks that I go through, sometimes I don't want anyone to be touched, and I just want to curl up into a ball and feel the pressure. And then there are other times where I need someone holding me, and for me to know that someone is there. And I'm going to say this the whole entire show, it really depends on the person and what they're going through and what their walk is.
I think it's really important to meet people where they're at and not try to change them for how you see them.
Right. Talk to them, not talk at them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and going along with that, I know a lot of times when people say they have a mental illness or they're struggling with this, we kind of tend to shy away from them, and we're like, okay, I don't really know how to deal with that, so I'm not going to really get involved with that. So why do you think we look at people with mental illnesses as less than sometimes, and when God sees them just as worthy?
I think our society tends to put a cap on people. You're normal, you're not normal. And so if you don't fall into what our society defines as normal, then we automatically put them to the side.
I mean, what is normal
Right.
ultimately?
Exactly.
But I also feel like whenever someone with a mental illness or someone with anxieties or whatever, they feel less than.
Right.
Because I surely felt less than after my first attack. And so I think that's just a mirror image of it, because a lot of times they don't know where to go to, they don't know who to turn to. And if they have turned to someone, then it could have been a negative situation. So yeah.
Yeah, so I know a lot of times that we were just saying that mental illness is kind of tagged with shame. Do you personally, I know that you've gone through it, is there a practical way that you would say to help someone get rid of the shame, to just kind of be there for them and let them know that it's not something that they should be ashamed of?
I mean, I'm already obnoxious and I'm out there and that's just who I am. So with me and my experiences, I didn't have a struggle of being out there with it, but I did pick who I talked to very carefully. It was very hard because I did talk to people and they did not understand. But with that, as like Lindsay said, just meet whoever halfway, and they'll end up driving the car the rest of the way, pretty much.
That's amazing. Thank you guys so much for sharing. And we are actually going to go to Candace with a word on the street.
The problem within our society today is that people are simply unaware of mental illnesses. This often brings a negative reaction towards people who suffer from them. While people are beginning to understand the severity that is a mental illness, there's still plenty of uncertainty that comes with it. That's why we're on the street asking people this question: how can we as a society bring awareness to mental illnesses? Let's see what they had to say.
Well, when it comes to mental illness, as I would say with any other issue, as far as awareness goes, I mean, social media is a huge thing. Celebrities, I mean, we're all familiar with, I think it was ALS Ice Bucket Challenge, and so like everyone in the country figured that out just because people started dumping buckets of ice water on each other.
I definitely think talking about mental illnesses in public, in churches, in movies, in TV, everything would help bring awareness to mental illness, and people that have it, I think it'd be best for them to share and talk amongst their friends about it, and not hide it like, oh, I have to take medication for my anxiety or my depression.
I think what we can do to raise awareness is possibly, having people who suffer from mental illness try to talk to others who are uneducated about the subject.
I would say that a good way to bring awareness would be to kind of take a look at like people who have like gone past their disability and done like incredible things.
People who have mental illnesses are quietly and internally suffering. We as a society are to be loving and accepting towards people who are struggling with mental illnesses. And we as Christians are called to love and pray for all who are suffering. I'm Candace Herring with Word on the Street. Back to you guys in the studio.
Thank you, Candace, for the great word on the street. And now we're here with Professor Payton, who is a psychology professor here at SEU.
So good to be here with you tonight.
Yeah, we're glad to have you.
Yes, thank you so much. So previously we were talking about mental illness. We were talking about, what it is, how people handle it, how you can encourage people. So now we're kind of talking about how mental illness is in the church. So along with being in the church, there are also people who aren't Christians who have mental illness. So my question is, if someone who isn't a Christian has a mental illness, how do we offer hope in their suffering?
Well, I mean, initially you'll have to have a relationship with that person, non-judgmental. We don't stigmatize people with mental health issues. Whatever open door that you can construct with that person is one step closer for their help. Whether they want to go to a professional counselor or not, your support can be instrumental in helping them at least accept what they're going through and then maybe build on that and do something about it.
So how can the church rise up and be there for those who are mentally ill?
That's a great question because the church is not rising up and being there for those that are mentally ill. 50% of Christians feel that prayer and Bible study alone should help a person overcome a mental illness. They're not looking at the brain chemistry, they're not looking at the medical side of the issue. The pastor has to lead the way. He is the one or she is the one that is a spotlight on Sunday morning. My pastor actually gave an example of his mom who had bipolar disorder, spoke about it extensively in his sermon, and really kind of destigmatized the issue of mental health, which was great. I mean, really wise of him. If the pastor would lead the way, then others in the church can open up more about their issues, maybe through pastoral counseling, professional counseling. Every church should have a referral list of Christian, if they can, Christian psychologists or psychiatrists, if not people that are, full of integrity as therapists that understand Christian faith. Support groups, recovery groups, all these things help people think differently about mental illness in a positive way rather than a way that stigmatizes folks.
Right. And why do you think we have a stigma about people with mental illnesses?
If you had a broken arm right now, I'd understand. If you told me that you're depressed and you can't get over your depression, then I'm thinking that you're mentally incapable to handle yourself and the world that you live in. And so that stigmatization is easy to put that label on you because you can't handle life, so to speak. And it's just there and it's not going away, unfortunately, unless there's a broader understanding in the church to be more accepting and understand people with mental illness.
And I feel like a lot of times that is a mirror effect because whenever it comes to people with mental illnesses and things like that, they don't feel capable of, or from my experience, they don't feel capable of doing life properly, if you want to say that. So I think that's whenever it comes to whenever it comes to that effect. So I think that we also put that stigma upon us because we're like, oh, I don't know what's going on, and then people see that and they're like, oh, she doesn't know what's going on, or he doesn't know how to do life properly. And so, yes, go.
I think it's also like what kind of culture or atmosphere we set within our church. Like you talked about your pastor, like being vulnerable from the pulpit. I think that is huge. Like I strongly believe like there is so much breakthrough in vulnerability. The courage to be vulnerable, like, hey, like this is what I'm struggling with, or this is what I know. And like there's someone in the congregation that probably is struggling with it or is experiencing it in the moment, and now they can get breakthrough because it's like, wow, someone in here relates to me. Now I feel capable of going up to them and talking to them, and with that is a domino effect of big breakthrough. So
a study that was done 4 years ago indicates that most pastors that see clinical psychologists are reluctant to tell their congregation that they might have depression or anxiety. And so they don't have to give all the nitty-gritty details, but if a pastor would self-disclose that, hey, I'm fighting with depression or anxiety, then the congregation can open up and not only support him, but others in the congregation. Hard thing for a pastor to do, though.
Right.
Yes,
so.
definitely.
And I think that also we don't know how to not be okay. And it is okay to not be okay sometimes.
Absolutely, yes.
And we, as Christians, as people, we put that mask on.
Yeah.
And we're like, hey, I'm perfectly fine. Lord knows I've done it many times. So I think that it is okay to not be okay. And that's just the basis of life.
Yeah, right. And on the totally opposite side of the spectrum, do you think there's an issue with victimization in mental illness? Like someone who's like kind of milking it to like feel like, my personal experience with that is I had someone who would make me feel like I was the problem, and so personally that's where I come from with that. So that's like my concept, and then I met Haley and she has given me a whole new light on the subject. So do you think that can be a problem and kind of like a roadblock as to why some people in the church are kind of turned off by mental illnesses?
Yeah, labels are unfortunate because labels categorize us and categorize our thinking in a certain direction. The label can be beneficial for help, and that label can also cause us to use it as an excuse. A friend I know had bipolar disorder. She went from job to job. She failed to take her medication regularly, and she used that excuse to do anything she wanted with her behavior toward my family, and it was like a downhill spiral for her. You know, regrettably, we walked with her through it. Many, many years we walked with it through her to try to help build her up and support her. But she became her own worst enemy by labeling herself and then living up to that label. You know, it's pretty sad, actually. So.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I think it goes back to like if I had someone that was struggling with something, like asking them, like if I had that relationship, like how bad do you want to get out of whatever it is that it is? Because I believe when it comes to stuff like that, like I think of bondage, like how bad do you want to get out of this bondage? And then going back to the word, like when it comes to anxiety, like there is hope for that. There is an anchor for that hope. Are you willing to believe in it? And are you willing to take the steps to get out of it? Because if they're just using excuses, it's like, okay, how long are we going to use these excuses? Like, how bad do you want to get out of it? And that's just the way that I think. So also, like, I don't know, putting myself in a position, okay, this is Skip's way of thinking, but how you can also, like Lindsay talked about earlier, like meeting them where they are, but also like being like, no, like you can beat this, and I'm going to be here with you to do that. So you got to help me help you out too.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well,
So I guess with that thought in mind, we will close out this panel, but stick with us and we'll be right back right after this.
As a Christian, I've been in circles of people with various views on mental illness. I've heard some say it's demonic or some sort of spiritual warfare, or it's owing to a lack of faith, discipline, or virtue, depending on what the particular mental illness is. And some see it as simply a chemical imbalance. I don't deny that any one of those reasons I just mentioned may be a possible cause for a given illness, but I think it's unwise to jump to a conclusion about an issue as complex as this. Rather than assume a supposed cause to someone's attitude or behavior, we should seek to understand them. Biblically speaking, spiritual warfare is a real thing, and anyone who's been a Christian for a little while can attest to the troubles that a lack of faith can bring. But we cannot deny that these mental illnesses are, in some cases, legitimate physical issues outside of a person's control. And that is never grounds for someone with an illness to abuse it or use it to take advantage of someone. But perhaps it may be reason to extend more grace and provide us wisdom to treat and understand that person better. We need to understand that it is possible to be a Christian and have mental illness. One person that comes to mind is Charles Spurgeon, known to many as the Prince of Preachers. He battled with depression for most of his life, but as far as human judgment goes, no one can deny that he knew the Lord or that he had a profound impact on many believers. It wasn't easy for him, but he believed that the Lord used his weakness to enrich his preaching and to help him understand the lowly of heart. He once said, "I would go into the deeps 100 times to cheer a downcast spirit. It is good for me to have been afflicted, that I might know how to speak a word in season to one that is weary." I'm Knowledge Washington, and that's your food for thought.
Thank you so much. So for this panel, we're just kind of going to dive right into it. So my first question, right into it. So my first question for you guys, is it possible for someone to use their mental illness as an excuse to not trust God?
I'll take this one. I think that you can use any excuse to not trust God, because that's just an excuse. That's what an excuse is. It's nothing. Literally, an excuse is nothing, for me at least. And anything can be used as an excuse. Oh, my dog died. Oh, I had a really bad day today, so I don't trust God. It rained 3 times in an hour because we're in Florida. And like that, those are very minimal reasons to blame God and not trust in Him. And I feel, with my experience, I was raised within like a very loving home and a very Christian home. And first thing, whenever I told my Grammy about my anxiety attacks, she was like, "Oh, that's the devil. We're gonna take that back, and we're not gonna do that ever again." So that's why I run to my family, and we run to God together. So whenever it comes to blaming things, whenever I first had it, I blamed myself. I'm like, what in the world is going on with me? Where can I fix it? And I did ask God why this is happening to me, because I had no clue.
Yeah.
And some days I still have no clue, because they'll flick on.
Yeah.
And I think that any excuse can be an excuse to not trust in God.
Right.
And that's when we need to be the light at the end of the tunnel and be like, hey, I'm going through all of this stuff, but you know what? God is still amazing, and He's bringing me through this.
I think you could connect not trusting God with the community is not supportive of me with a mental health issue.
Yes.
And then I just extrapolate to God. I mean, if they don't care about me, how in the world can God care about me? You know, and so it's easy to blame God, to not trust God in those circumstances. If the church community would bolster up people with mental illness, then God might be more attractive to that person, and that lack of trust can be healed. It can be changed.
Yeah, exactly.
So.
Yeah, so going off of that, so how do we approach that situation when it kind of seems like somebody in our life is dealing with mental illnesses, but they do seem to be using God as an excuse for not trusting God? So how do you approach that situation, knowing like, okay, I need to be compassionate, I need to walk alongside this person, but at the same time, like, iron sharpens iron. I want to continue to uplift this person.
Yeah,
You know?
you can't love them enough, nor can you be overly directive and alienate them from what you're trying to achieve, and that's to help them. So it depends on the person. It's a really fine balance. It's a tightrope walk. And so, you know, as you love them into maybe professional counseling, pastoral counseling, some sense of helping them, because they will continue to fight you, probably based on the illness itself. So somehow love them to some, remediation in their own mental health state. Yeah.
Gotcha.
No easy answer,
Right.
really.
And speaking of those different kinds of people, you're a professor here at SEU. Have you ever had students that have come to you with struggling with this?
Yeah, many times in the last 12 years, students that were suffering from bipolar disorder, depression, anxiety, eating disorders, you just about name it. So being a professor, it's ethical for me to refer that student to the counseling center.
Right.
That they can get help, be there to support them. I'll talk to you anytime you want. But the counseling center at Southeastern is wonderful, and they can really help you. And encourage them to do so and not feel they're stigmatized and walking one step behind the crowd.
Right,
Yeah.
and I think that's so important to build that community where somebody feels like that they can trust you to not judge them or to just point them in the direction from a place of love to get help.
Yeah, all the studies indicate college students are experiencing depression and anxiety at elevated rates year after year after year. I mean, you all live in a very stressful, circumstances as students, et cetera. So you know. Yeah.
Absolutely. And then just kind of what we were talking about earlier, like a couple seconds ago, how you were saying that your Grammy says that the attacks are of the devil. So how do we factor in attacks from the devil in these scenarios? In what?
Well,
I feel like this is a Haley question.
Hey guys, I think for me, I'm naturally a happy person. I'm like, hey, how's it going? What's up? I'm obnoxious to the point of, but I'm lovable at the same time. And that is not me. And so I feel that since that is a change that has happened to me, that is an attack from the devil. And whenever I am struggling really hard and I run to my family and I go, hey, yo, this is a rough day, let's pray together. And we do like a phone train kind of deal. And after that, I'm either feeling better, depending on how bad the anxiety is, or I'm like completely fine.
That's awesome.
And yeah, so I feel that it, as I said, it really depends on the person and it depends on the situation. And everything is a fine line. You're walking on a tightrope with a lot of these things. So, yes.
Yeah. Well, thank you all so much for sharing. Thank you for just talking about this and sharing your experiences. I'm going to go ahead and pray, and we'll close out the show that way. So, dear God, thank you so much for tonight. Thank you for these conversations. Thank you for bringing up these things that we just shy away from talking about. Thank you for speaking through us. I just pray that tonight you would use the words and the things that we've talked about to be a blessing and a light to others, God, that our own new knowledge would spread across to those who need to hear it. And we just thank you for this place and for this ministry and for the ability to come together like this. So we just love you, Lord, and we praise you and thank you. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Yeah. So. Well, thank you guys so much for being open, honest, and sharing with us. But until next time, make sure you live it raw. There you go. Good job.